What if I told you that every single prayer you've whispered in desperation, every tear you've shed asking God to change your circumstances, has already been answered in ways your soul hasn't learned to recognize yet? What if the very struggle you're experiencing right now is actually the divine response you've been waiting for, disguised in a form your limited understanding can't interpret? What if I revealed that there's a spiritual frequency broadcasting abundance directly to you at this very moment, but your internal receiver is tuned to the wrong channel? What if the breakthrough you've been praying for isn't coming from outside your life, but from inside your consciousness? What if everything you thought you knew about how God operates has been completely backwards, and the real truth is so powerful that once you grasp it, you'll never be the same person again? I'm not talking about cheap consolation or spiritual bypassing that tells you to accept mediocrity as God's will. I'm talking about a revelation so transformative that when you fully comprehend it, your entire existence will shift from victim consciousness to creator consciousness. Your soul is the laboratory where God mixes faith with reality. And if that laboratory has been contaminated with patterns of hopelessness and limitation, even the purest miracles will transform into disappointments when they reach your experience. For centuries, we have completely misunderstood the nature of divine intervention and spiritual manifestation. We believed that being spiritual meant kneeling until our knees bled, repeating pleas until our voices gave out, and hoping that someday, if we were good enough, God would finally hear us from his distant throne. But Isaiah 55:11 demolishes that lie once and for all, when it declares that God's word never returns void, but accomplishes exactly what he intends it to accomplish. His word never comes back empty, but we come back empty because we've been listening with the wrong ears and looking with the wrong eyes. The revelation that will completely transform your existence is this simple yet profound truth. God isn't waiting for you to become perfect before he blesses you. He's waiting for your consciousness to expand enough to receive what has already been prepared for you since before the foundation of the world. Every blessing you've ever prayed for already exists in the spiritual realm, floating like radio waves in the atmosphere, waiting for you to tune into the correct frequency. It's not that God is stingy with his gifts or playing favorites with his children. It's that we've been deaf to his language, speaking in the dialect of lack when he only responds in the vocabulary of abundance. Let me reveal something that will shake the foundations of everything you thought you knew about spiritual prosperity and divine provision. Right now, as you're reading these words, there are millions of blessings moving toward you from every direction imaginable. Opportunities are seeking your attention with supernatural precision. People who can transform your destiny are about to cross your path in ways that will seem like coincidence, but are actually divine appointments. Resources are being reorganized throughout the universe to flow into your hands at exactly the right moment. But all these blessings are like rays of light that only manifest when they find the correct surface to reflect upon, and that surface is your conscious faith, your genuine expectation, and your heart that's truly open to receive. The problem isn't that God has closed heaven's doors, but that we have closed our heart's doors, not out of malice or rebellion, but out of ignorance and misunderstanding. For years, for generations, we've been programmed to believe that we're unworthy, that prosperity is somehow sinful, that suffering is saintly, that asking for abundance is selfish. These mental programs act like spiritual viruses that block the download of divine provision into human experience. It's like having the fastest internet connection in the world, but your device is infected with malware that prevents websites from loading properly. Proverbs 23:7 gives us the master key that unlocks every door of manifestation when it reveals that as a person thinks in their heart, so they become. Notice it doesn't say, as their behavior is, or as their bank account reflects. It specifically says, as they think in their heart. The heart isn't just the organ that pumps blood through your body, it's the electromagnetic center where you generate the frequency that determines which waves of reality you capture and experience. When your heart thinks scarcity, you automatically tune into the broadcast of lack. When your heart thinks abundance, you automatically connect with the channel of divine prosperity. This isn't cheap philosophy or superficial positive thinking dressed up in spiritual language. This is quantum physics applied to biblical spirituality in its purest form. Scientists have discovered that the heart generates an electromagnetic field that's 5,000 times more powerful than the brain's field. This field doesn't just affect your physical body, it constantly interacts with the quantum field that surrounds all creation. In spiritual terms, your heart is the antenna that broadcasts signals to heaven and receives responses from God. But if that antenna is configured to the frequency of fear, it can only capture experiences that validate and reinforce that fear. Jesus explained this with crystal clarity in Mark 11:24, when he taught us to believe that we have already received whatever we ask for in prayer and it will manifest in our experience. The key word that most people completely overlook is believe. He doesn't say, hope that maybe it will happen someday if you're lucky. He says, believe that you have already received it. This is present tense faith in action. This is living from the end result. This is feeling gratitude in advance. This is the internal certainty that what's invisible has already become visible in the spiritual realm. And now it's simply a matter of time before it materializes in the physical realm. Now let's dive into deeper waters where few dare to swim, because it requires confronting truths that traditional religious thinking has kept hidden for centuries. There's an enormous difference between believing in God and thinking like God thinks, between having faith in divine power and actually activating that divine power through your transformed consciousness. Most people believe in God, but they continue thinking like victims of circumstance. They pray for miracles, but they vibrate at frequencies of desperation and hopelessness. Then they wonder why heaven seems deaf to their pleas and blind to their needs. The revelation that changes everything is understanding that God doesn't operate from human logic of merit and reward systems. He operates from immutable spiritual laws that he established in creation itself. One of those fundamental laws is the law of correspondence. As above, so below, as within, so without. Your external world will always be the precise reflection of your internal world, without exception and without favoritism. If your inner landscape is filled with chaos, your outer experience will manifest chaos. If your inner landscape is filled with peace, your outer experience will reflect harmony and order. It's not that God is unfair, it's that he's perfectly fair, returning exactly what you emit from the core of your being. Romans 12:2 gives us the most practical and revolutionary instruction for transformation when it commands us not to conform to this world's patterns, but to be transformed by the renewal of our minds, so we can experience God's good, pleasing, and perfect will. Transform yourselves through mental renewal. It doesn't say, wait for God to transform you from the outside. It clearly states that you must transform yourself through the conscious renewal of your thinking patterns. This is an act of deliberate will and personal responsibility that every human being must take for updating the mental software they use to interpret reality. Let me share the story of Margaret, a 43-year-old teacher, divorced, with 2 teenage children and overwhelming debt that was suffocating her dreams. For years, she had prayed desperately for a financial miracle, but her internal conversation was a constant loop of, I don't have enough, everything is too expensive, I'll never escape this situation, and God must have forgotten about me. One night, after hours of crying and desperation, she asked herself a question that changed everything. What if God has already answered my prayer? But I can't see it because I'm looking from the problem instead of looking from the solution. Margaret began a spiritual experiment that would revolutionize her understanding of how divine provision actually works. Every morning, before getting out of bed, she would close her eyes and imagine living the financial life she truly desired. Not from the desperation of someone who needs something, but from the gratitude of someone who already possesses it. She visualized herself paying bills with ease, shopping without anxiety, sleeping peacefully without financial worries consuming her thoughts. Most importantly, she began speaking like someone who was already prosperous, completely transforming her vocabulary and self-talk. Instead of saying, "I can't afford it," she would say, "I'm choosing to invest my money differently right now." Instead of declaring, "I'm broke," she would affirm, "I'm in a process of financial transformation." Instead of complaining, "Nothing ever works out for me," she would declare, "I'm discovering new opportunities every single day." The first few months, nothing visible seemed to change in her external circumstances. But something invisible was definitely shifting. Her energy, her confidence, her decision-making process, and the way people responded to her presence. A doctor at the school where she taught offered her additional hours tutoring his children. A neighbor mentioned a business opportunity she had been ignoring for months. A friend asked her to house-sit during vacation and paid her more than expected. Within 14 months, Margaret had not only paid off all her debts, but had saved enough for a down payment on a house. The miracle wasn't that God dropped money from heaven. The miracle was that her mind aligned with the frequency of abundance, and from that frequency, she began seeing opportunities that had always been there, but were invisible when she vibrated in scarcity. Ephesians 3:20 reminds us of the magnitude of power residing within us when it declares that God is able to do immeasurably more than we ask or imagine, according to His power that works within us. According to the power working within us right now, not in some distant heaven or unreachable dimension, the infinite power of God is circulating through your nervous system, beating in your heart, breathing in your lungs, thinking in your brain at this very moment. The question isn't whether God has sufficient power to transform your situation. The question is whether your consciousness is sufficiently expanded to be a clean channel for that power to flow through. Napoleon Hill, after studying the most successful people of his era for over 25 years, concluded something the Bible had revealed millennia before. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. But the key is in the sequence. First conceive, then believe, finally achieve. Conception is mental pregnancy. Belief is gestation in faith. Achievement is the natural birth of what you've nurtured in your consciousness with unwavering consistency and absolute conviction. Before we continue deeper into this transformation, I want to extend an invitation that comes straight from my heart to yours. If you sense that these words are awakening something that's been sleeping inside you, if you recognize that you've been operating from limited consciousness and you're ready to expand beyond those boundaries, I would be honored if you would subscribe to this channel. Not for the numbers or statistics, but because you deserve to continue receiving content that feeds your soul and expands your spiritual perspective in ways that create lasting change. And if you truly want this truth to transform other lives, please share this video with someone you know needs to hear it right now. Sometimes a message like this arrives at the exact moment when someone is considering giving up, and your act of sharing could be the instrument God uses to change a destiny. That's not an exaggeration. It's the truth of love's multiplying power in action. Your simple click of the share button might be the bridge between someone's despair and their breakthrough. We're entering territory that requires brutal honesty with yourself, because we're going to explore unconscious spiritual sabotage, those invisible chains you forged without realizing it, those self-destructive patterns you repeat, expecting different results. Most people are trapped in what Einstein called insanity, doing the same thing repeatedly while expecting different outcomes. Spiritually, we pray the same way, think the same way, act the same way, then wonder why our lives remain stuck in identical patterns year after year. Here's what probably no one has explained with this level of clarity. Self-sabotage isn't your enemy, it's your poorly trained protector. It's that part of you that was wounded at some point in your past and now does everything possible to keep you safe, even if that safety means keeping you small and limited. When you were a child and heard your parents arguing about money, your subconscious recorded, "Money causes conflict and pain." When you attempted something new and failed while others mocked you, your inner mind concluded, "It's safer not to take risks." Ladaki, when you expressed your dreams and someone ridiculed them, your psyche decided, "It's better to keep dreams secret and small." Decades later, you're still operating from those obsolete programs without questioning their validity or relevance. These programs act like spiritual viruses that sabotage every attempt at prosperity and breakthrough. It's like trying to download blessings with a connection blocked by firewalls of fear and limitation. The download never completes because something inside you is constantly interrupting it, convinced it's protecting you from some imaginary danger that no longer exists. 2 Corinthians 10, 4 and 5 gives us the most effective spiritual warfare strategy when it declares that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal but mighty in God, for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Strongholds, arguments, thoughts that need to be taken captive and reprogrammed. This isn't a battle against external demons, but against internal mental structures that have become stronger than your faith and more influential than God's truth in your life. I learned about a man named David, a 34-year-old electrician who had inherited from his grandfather the belief that money corrupts good people and ruins families. Throughout his entire life, every time he began to prosper, something inexplicable would happen. He would lose tools, make costly mistakes, accept jobs below his worth, or simply reject lucrative opportunities without apparent reason. One day, after losing another important contract because he arrived late to a crucial appointment, he sat down and asked himself the question that changed his life. Why do I always sabotage my own success when it starts to manifest? David began tracing the origin of his self-sabotage patterns back to their roots. He remembered the stories his grandfather told about corrupt businessmen, about people who became evil after getting rich, about the nobility of honest poverty and the dangers of material success. Those stories had become his internal operating system, running automatically in the background of his consciousness. Every time he approached financial success, his protection program would activate to save him from becoming a bad person, even though that protection was actually destroying his potential. David's liberation process wasn't instantaneous, but it was systematic and thorough. He began by identifying every limiting belief he had inherited and questioning each one. Is this actually true, or is it just something I learned from someone else's experience? Then he searched for contrary evidence in Scripture and in real life. He found that Abraham was extremely wealthy and called God's friend, that Solomon had unimaginable riches blessed by God himself, that Job, after his testing, ended up twice as prosperous as before, and that Jesus said in John 10:10, "I have come that they might have life and have it abundantly." Slowly but consistently, David began replacing his scarcity programs with new truths based on God's word and character. Every morning he would declare, "I am blessed to be a blessing. My prosperity honors God and blesses many people. I deserve abundance because I am a son of the King of Kings." He didn't just say it with his mouth. He meditated on it until he felt it in his body, visualized it until it became his new identity and automatic way of thinking. Within 22 months, David had tripled his income, formed a construction company employing 18 people, and most importantly, broken the generational curse of poverty that had affected his family for decades. Philippians 4:8 gives us the formula for reprogramming our minds when it instructs us to think on whatever is true, noble, just, pure, lovely, of good report, virtuous, and praiseworthy. Think on these things constantly, not occasionally when you feel like it, but until it becomes your automatic nature to think from virtue instead of thinking from problems and limitations. The first step to breaking self-sabotage is naming it without judging yourself harshly. Ask yourself, in what areas of my life do I keep getting the same negative results repeatedly? That's your clue to where your strongest sabotage program operates. It might be in relationships, finances, health, or creative projects. Once identified, trace its origin by asking when you learned that belief, from whom you inherited it, and what situation created it. Finally, make a conscious, deliberate decision that this belief no longer serves you, and choose a new truth based on who God says you are and what He says you can become. Remember this fundamental principle. You cannot change what you don't acknowledge and bring into the light of consciousness. But once you illuminate those dark patterns with awareness, they automatically lose their power over you. It's like turning on a lamp in a room that had been dark for years. The monsters you thought you saw were just shadows projected by familiar furniture. And when light comes, you realize there was never anything to fear, only things you couldn't see clearly. Now we're going to explore the very heart of the creative power God gave you, the spoken word and its ability to shape reality itself. This is sacred territory where most people walk unconsciously, unaware that they're sculpting their reality with every syllable they pronounce. In Genesis 1, we observe the purest method of divine creation, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. There was no complicated process, no physical tools, no struggle or effort, only the word charged with absolute intention, and reality immediately reorganized itself to obey that declaration. If we were made in the image and likeness of the Creator, then we also possess that creative power in our words, though on a human scale, that's still incredibly potent. Proverbs 18:21 is devastatingly clear when it states that death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. It doesn't say the tongue influences your life a little bit. It declares that your tongue has absolute power over life and death in your experience. Every word you speak is a seed planted in the invisible soil of your future, and the harvest will be inevitable according to the nature of the seeds you've consistently sown. The problem is, we've been trained to use words completely unconsciously, almost like automatic reflexes without thought or intention. I'm broke. I'll never get ahead. The same thing always happens to me. I can't handle this situation anymore. Life is too complicated and unfair. Each of these declarations is a decree that the universe receives as a purchase order, and the universe, being perfectly obedient to the laws established by the Creator, immediately begins organizing circumstances, people, and events to validate your declaration. It's not that the universe is cruel or working against you. It's that the universe is absolutely just and fair, returning exactly what you order through your words and thoughts without making exceptions or judging whether it's good or bad for you. It's like a perfect echo that rebounds every sound you emit. If you shout desperation, it returns desperate experiences. If you declare abundance, it returns manifestations of prosperity. It's a system as precise as gravity, functioning whether you believe in it or not. Imagine what would happen if you began using your words with the same intentionality that an architect designs a building or a composer creates a symphony. If every morning, before your mind fills with the day's worries, you took 5 minutes to declare with conscious faith, "This day is filled with divine opportunities that only I can see and seize. God's wisdom guides me in every decision I make today. Prosperity flows toward me from directions I haven't even imagined yet. I am a magnet for the blessings of the Almighty. These aren't empty affirmations of superficial positive thinking. They're spiritual decrees based on the biblical truth of who you are as an heir of the kingdom. James 3:10 confronts us with an uncomfortable reality that most prefer to ignore. Out of the same mouth proceed blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. How many times daily do you bless and curse with the same tongue? You declare faith when you pray in the morning, but declare doubt when you complain in the afternoon. You bless when you're in church, but curse when facing challenges at work. Then you wonder why your life is an emotional roller coaster of contradictory experiences. It's because you're sending mixed signals to the quantum field, and it returns equally mixed results. The solution isn't complicated in theory, but requires iron discipline in practice. You need to become the vigilant guardian of your own mouth and thoughts. Before a word leaves your lips, ask yourself, does this declaration move me closer to or further from the life I truly want to experience? Is this complaint building my dream future or destroying it? When you catch yourself saying something negative, correct it immediately. Don't condemn yourself, simply reframe. If you said, "I'm ruined," immediately say, "I correct that. I'm in a process of financial transformation, and every day I discover new sources of income and opportunity." Napoleon Hill discovered that all the truly prosperous people he studied used what he called conscious auto-suggestion. They constantly repeated declarations of their goal, already accomplished, until their subconscious accepted them as established truth. Once the subconscious accepts something as true, it begins working automatically 24 hours a day to manifest it in the physical world. This isn't magic or illusion. It's the natural functioning of the human mind when consciously aligned with the spiritual laws governing creation. Let me give you a practical exercise that will transform your life if you perform it with unwavering consistency. Every night before sleep, write 3 things you're genuinely grateful for, no matter how difficult your day was. There's always something to feel grateful for, even if it's as simple as, "I'm grateful my heart beats without me having to remember it," or "I'm grateful I had food on my table today." Gratitude is the most direct shortcut to the vibration of abundance. And when you sleep in genuine gratitude, your subconscious works all night reorganizing your neurology to receive more of what you're grateful for. Every morning, before checking your phone, before connecting with world news, before allowing external voices to invade your inner space, take 5 minutes to declare aloud who you are and what you expect from this day. Don't do it as an empty mechanical ritual. Do it with authentic emotion, feeling every word resonate in your body. I am a child of the Most High God. I am an heir of His eternal kingdom. I am a pure channel for His miracles. This day brings me blessings I cannot yet imagine. I walk in faith, not fear. I walk in abundance, not lack. Everything I touch prospers because God's infinite grace rests upon my life. Before we advance to our final section, I want to extend another heartfelt invitation. If you've made it this far, it's because something deep within you recognizes that this message arrived at the exact moment of your life when you needed it most. This isn't coincidence. It's a divine appointment orchestrated by heaven itself. I would love for you to become part of this community of souls awakening to their true spiritual power. Subscribe if you haven't already. Activate notifications so you won't miss any content. And please tell me in the comments what has been the most impactful revelation you've received so far. I read every comment, and every testimony inspires me to continue creating content that transforms lives from the inside out. If you know someone who urgently needs to hear this message, share it without hesitation. Your simple act of sharing could be the bridge between someone's despair and their breakthrough, between their giving up and their greatest victory. We arrive now at the culmination of this revelation, the place where everything we've explored fuses into an understanding that has the power to transform not only your life, but your complete identity and destiny. We're going to discuss what it means to think with the mind of Christ, to operate from divine consciousness, to become a conscious co-creator of your reality instead of a powerless victim of circumstances. This is the highest level of spiritual existence a human being can aspire to, and it's available to you right now, not in some distant future after years of religious preparation. 1 Corinthians 2:16 makes a declaration that completely revolutionizes our understanding of human potential when it states, "But we have the mind of Christ." It doesn't say we'll have it someday if we behave perfectly. It doesn't say some chosen few possess it. It declares that we, right now in this moment, have complete access to the same mind that conceived the universe, that transformed water into wine, that calmed storms with a word, that raised the dead with a command. That mind doesn't reside in some distant, inaccessible heaven. It's within you, waiting to be activated through conscious faith and disciplined thinking. But what does it actually mean to think with the mind of Christ in practical, applicable terms? It means seeing infinite possibilities where others see only insurmountable obstacles. It means maintaining perfect peace when everything around you is absolute chaos. It means knowing in the deepest part of your being that you're completely safe and protected even when external circumstances suggest otherwise. It's the unshakable consciousness that nothing happening in the external world has the power to alter the truth of who you are internally. It's living from the glorious end, knowing that everything is already finished in the spiritual plane. When Jesus slept in the boat during the most violent storm the disciples had ever experienced, while waves threatened to sink them and wind roared with destructive fury, it wasn't indifference keeping him at peace. It was absolute consciousness that his identity didn't depend on temporary circumstances. His peace didn't come from the absence of problems, but from the constant presence of the Father in his consciousness. When he finally awakened and rebuked the wind, saying, "Peace, be still," he wasn't speaking from fear, but from total authority of one who knows perfectly who he is and where his power originates. That same spiritual authority resides in you when you learn to operate from that expanded level of consciousness. The secret lies in understanding that your true identity completely transcends your personal history and current circumstances. You are not your past mistakes or accumulated failures. You are not your current bank account or medical diagnosis. You are not what people think about you or how they treat you. Your real identity is what God declared over you before time existed. You are my beloved child in whom I am well pleased. When you anchor your sense of identity in that immutable, unchangeable truth, everything else becomes temporary circumstance without power to define you. Ephesians 3:20 reminds us of the absolutely unlimited potential residing within us. Now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us. Pay special attention to those final words, according to the power that works in us. It doesn't say the power working in distant heaven. It says the power operating within you right now. God already deposited everything necessary inside you before you were born. The question isn't whether God has sufficient power to transform your situation. The question is whether your consciousness is sufficiently expanded to allow that power to flow without resistance through your daily experience. Let me share an analogy that will change your perspective forever. Imagine you're a mighty river. The water flowing through you isn't yours. It belongs to the infinite ocean that is God. Your responsibility isn't to create the water, but to keep the channel clean and clear so water flows without obstacles to where it needs to go. When you fill your mind with fears, you're placing enormous rocks in the channel. When you constantly feed doubts, you're building dams that block the flow. When you cling to resentment and bitterness, you're contaminating the pure water that must pass through you. But when you cleanse your consciousness through genuine forgiveness, active faith, and unconditional love, you become a crystal channel through which miracles flow naturally into every area of your life. The transformation I'm describing doesn't happen automatically overnight, but it can begin in an instant of decision. It starts with the conscious choice that from this moment forward, you will guard your thoughts like a sentinel guards the most precious treasure. You will question every limiting belief that arises in your mind. You will replace every word of doubt with a declaration of unwavering faith. You will practice gratitude even when you don't feel like it. Napoleon Hill wrote something permanently engraved in my soul. Both poverty and riches are offspring of thought. Every external condition you experience in your life originates from an internal thought pattern you've maintained consistently. If that's true, and it is, according to all spiritual laws, then it's also true that you can change any external condition by first transforming the thought pattern that sustains and feeds it. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't need academic degrees. You don't need perfect conditions. You only need the iron will to begin right now, where you are, with what you have. As we reach the close of this transformative revelation, I want to leave you with a powerful image I hope you'll carry with you every day of your existence. Imagine that every morning, at the exact moment you wake up, God hands you a completely blank canvas and a brush loaded with infinite colors. And he says with loving voice, paint the day you truly want to live. Some days you'll create masterpieces that fill you with joy. Other days you'll only make imperfect sketches while you learn. There will be days when you make mistakes and have to start over with patience. But what matters isn't technical perfection. It's the conscious intention to create instead of simply react, to bless instead of curse, to trust instead of fear. So I leave you with this final question that only you can answer from the deepest part of your heart. What are you going to create today with the divine mind God deposited within you? Will you continue repeating the same obsolete patterns that have kept you stagnant for years, or will you dare to think in a completely new way? The choice, as always, is in your hands. God gave you unlimited power. God gave you all necessary tools. God gave you complete instructions in His eternal word. Now it's up to you to activate all of that through faith in action, disciplined thinking, and conscious words. Your transformed life is waiting for you to make the decision. Your glorious destiny is waiting for you to fully awaken. And all of heaven is waiting for you to finally understand who you really are and the absolutely unlimited power you carry within. Forward, child of God. Forward, heir of the eternal kingdom. Your moment is now.